Thank you, Mr. President. You sort of want to believe that you will have your parents forever. You feel like you will live with them forever. And my father and I joked quite a bit about how he was going to make it to 100. And after serving as 8 years on the Board of Supervisors, when I was done, it was like, oh, I'm so glad I never had to do an adjournment for one of my folks. And here I am on the Senate floor, and as I was traveling to the airport last Thursday, I got the text from my sister that my father had passed away. He was 91 years old. He had fought non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that created blood clots, pulmonary embolism, and he went to be with Jesus in heaven on Thursday afternoon. So I was thankful I had a chance to fly to Denver a couple weeks ago to thank him for raising me and to say goodbye to my dad. He was born Klaas Meindert Moorlach in the Netherlands on October 27, 1927. He was the second of 6 siblings. He would endure Nazi occupation during World War II, and I could tell probably stories till the end of the night on what suffering that was. After the war and life settled down, he attended Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where he earned a doctorandus in economics with distinction. And even to this day, Erasmus is one of the top universities in Europe. He married my mother, Rika Dina Cornelia de Boer, who was born on, he married her on August 27, 1953, and she was number 6 of 7 siblings. They would have 2 children in the Netherlands, myself and my brother Edward, before they immigrated to the United States in 1960. 3 of my mother's brothers had already immigrated to the United States, and Edward de Boer, my mother's brother, was our sponsor, and he would, in the late 60s, actually run successfully for the Orange County Republican Central Committee, where he served with Walter Knott of Knott's Berry Farm fame. That might have been a seed when I was a young person for where I am today. My folks Americanized their names to Kent and Rita, and mine to John, and they would have 2 more children, Kent Michael and Anna Marie. My dad left his successful family business in the grain industry, so if you ever go to Northern Holland, you'll see the Moorlach Meelfabriek, sort of the biggest business in town. It's a flour mill in the city of Uithuizermeeden. But here in the States, he went into the insurance industry and attained the Chartered Life Underwriter, or the CLU designation. He was an agent for Penn Mutual Life Insurance Company, where he was a colleague with David Cox, who would later become a California Assemblyman and Senator, and for whom the Cox Lounge is named. And so when I was treasurer of the county, I'd always come up and always be greeted so nicely by David Cox. So it is so nice to see his photo in the lounge, because he was just a dear man. My dad also sold property and casualty insurance, and pretty much sold within the Dutch community, Bellflower, Artesia, Norwalk, Paramount, La Palma, and all the way to Chino, where most of the dairymen started to move to when I was younger. He was a busy man, starting all over, and so I would always lament, why is my dad so busy? Why do I you don't see him much? And here I am, like, busy. But he instilled loves in me. He took us to the beach. I mean, when we were kids, you know, the Pacific Ocean is a whole lot better than the North Sea. You know, you got waves, and it's just great. And we would go to Bolsa Chica on Sunday afternoons. He would take us to the slopes. My dad, when he was in college, would go to the Austrian Alps and ski in the wintertime. And so he brought us to Mount Baldy back in 1961. That's when I started snow skiing here locally. And then he would take us all over. And then he would take us on trails. He took us to the top of Mount San Gorgonio, the highest mountain in Southern California. He took us to the top of Mount Baldy, or Mount San Antonio, it's the technical name. One of the more memorable trips was hiking to the top of Mount Whitney in the Sierras. And one of the most amazing trips was actually hiking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon when we were teenagers going to Phantom Ranch. But he would join me, because that started an annual backpack trip. I'd be somewhere every September, and my dad hiked with us for a long time, for years. He would say, let me start before you guys start. And he would go up the trail, and we'd meet him at the camp. It was his drives up and down 395 to Mammoth when we would ski in the winter that I would see all these historical landmark signs 500 yards ahead or whatever. And so that started a hobby of visiting every historical landmark in the state of California. But his focus was World War II. And he didn't take us to normal movies. He would take us to Tora, 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 or The Longest Day, or Patton. That was what my dad watched. I can still remember in 1973, in my senior year in high school and starting college, every Sunday night we had to watch World at War, which was a series back then in 1973. That was just such a focal point for my dad. One of the fun things about my dad was that he talked to everybody. He was very gregarious, complete strangers, and he would engage. And sometimes we'd go, what's he doing that for? He doesn't know these people. It was sort of a running kind of thing, but here we are as adults talking to everyone and having fun. And then for some of us, we felt sometimes maybe he was a little distant when we were together, but I think that made us fiercely independent as 4 kids. He raised us in the Dutch Reformed Church of America, the RCA, so we were raised in a Christian home with great church. But with that, he sort of had an Abraham aspect to his life. He said, when Abraham was told by God, leave and go to a land that I will show you, that seemed to be something that was embedded in my father too, because leaving, a great job, a great business, a great location, and starting all over was a big deal. But it was a model for me, because I left a partnership that I should have been in for my whole life, a CPA practice, to venture out into public life. And it certainly gave my sister the ability to take a job transfer to Colorado, where she would then meet her husband in a new land and raise her family there. And my brother, Kent, went on to take a call in a church in Tennessee, and he made the big move to Tennessee as well. So my dad was a model in taking the leap into a land that God would show. In closing, and I'm glad I'm holding up really well, my dad is survived by my mother and his 4 kids and their spouses, 13 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren. And his memorial service will be April 13th at 11 a.m. at Christ Community Church. It was formerly Community Reformed Church, where I grew up, and actually where I married my wife, Trina. But I want to thank you, colleagues, for your kind words, notes, emails, cards, texts of condolences at my family's time of loss. I am really appreciative of your being family. Thank you, Mr. President.